The woman wanted to seek help. However, she saw the doctor's corpse on the ground. The woman screamed in shock, but the next second, her face was splattered with blood. The nurse was quickly brutally killed by the pursuing female monster. The female monster was an evil spirit that had just crawled out of a grave. A gentle touch would easily peel off a layer of her skin. The place where her grave was made is called the Pet Cemetery. The Pet Cemetery is located in the town of Tonino, Maine. The town was built by an indigenous tribe hundreds of years ago. The tribe built it with the purpose of summoning spirits, and the spirits would protect the tribe from harm by demons. The demons lived in a small divine swamp. The demons were separated from the pet cemetery by a barrier of withered trees. Occasionally, someone would cross over and resurrect the dead corpses. All of this was the work of the demons. Their purpose was to bring chaos to the human world. All resurrected life would lose its sanity. The story takes place in 1969. The farmer's son died on the battlefield. He secretly buried the body in this cemetery. The farmer was determined to bring his son back to life no matter what. Soon, strange sounds started coming from the ground. The farmer crouched nearby, anxiously observing. The pet dog instinctively started digging in the soil. The body suddenly came back to life. He reached out and pulled the dog down into the ground. The farmer's son's name was Toby. Martin was his childhood friend whom he grew up with support from his family. He decided to leave the town for a bustling city. He had applied to join a professional ice hockey team. His girlfriend Ella accompanied him. Just as the two of them drove out of the town, they collided with a crow flying towards them. They also noticed a pet dog crouching in front of the car. Its body was covered in dirt as if it had just crawled out of a grave. Martin wanted to reach out and touch it but heard a low growl. It was the big dog that Toby had dragged into the soil earlier. Now it had turned into a monster. They parked the car by the roadside and followed the dog to the farm. Toby stood coldly behind the door. Their friendship had already broken apart, because Martin's father had bribed the doctor. The doctor fabricated false medical records to exempt Martin from military service. Now Martin wants to leave town again. He joins the rival ice hockey team. For Toby, this was a betrayal. All Martin could do was try to console him. He didn't know that Toby had already died in battle. The military only notifies the family privately. The monster dog's attack was sudden. Ella was bitten on the arm by the dog. Her arm immediately filled with blood. The dog had a lot of strength. Martin tried his best but couldn't pull the dog away. After a while, Toby walked out of the house and fired a shot into the sky. The gunshot frightened the big dog. Martin successfully rescued Ella. Ella needed to receive treatment in the hospital for a period of time. Martin had to temporarily postpone his plan to leave the town. King was another friend of Martin's in the town. They had different circumstances. Martin wanted to go out and explore. King wanted to stay in the town. They talked about Toby. Martin mentioned when the dog attacked Ella. He stood in the house, looking on coldly for a long time. King also mentioned something strange. His girlfriend Chris had seen Toby on the street. Toby kept muttering a series of names. Martin drove to the farm again. He wanted to have a good talk with Toby. Toby just stood quietly in the courtyard. Jada curiously walked over. He discovered an animal corpse on the ground. Toby's hands were still stained with blood. It seemed that Toby was the culprit who killed the dog. As Martin approached closer, he heard strange noises coming from behind him. Martin instinctively turned his head but didn't see anything unusual. Then Toby mysteriously disappeared. The farmer walked over. He told Martin not to look for his son anymore. Toby had just come back from the battlefield and needed time to readjust. After returning home, Martin had an argument with his father. Martin's father told him not to wait for his girlfriend anymore. He needed to leave the town for another city. It seemed like he knew something terrible in the town. The scene shifted. Toby mumbled a long list of familiar names. There were the mayor, the police, his father, and two good friends. The principal of the school in the town suddenly came under attack. The monster dog snarled and pounced at her. The house immediately filled with screams. At the bonfire dance, Toby approached Chris. He asked her to dance with him. It was a very inappropriate move. Chris was King's girlfriend, and he's right there. Toby didn't wait for Chris's consent. He forcefully embraced her waist and made her dance. Everyone present stopped in confusion and watched. Toby rested his head on the girl's shoulder. He said, "You and King should both die." This statement ignited King's anger. King pushed Toby away to keep him away from his girlfriend. He considered their past friendship and didn't want to resort to violence. The principal gathered the other key figures in the town. The mayor, the police, and Martin's father all arrived. The principal had an ugly scar on his face. The monster dog was driven away. She suspected that someone had resurrected corpses in the small god swamp. Both King and Chris are Native Americans. After tonight's dance party, they could basically confirm that Toby was abnormal. King found Martin and planned to go to the church together. They wanted to search for the old records of this town. Chris stayed at home to search for clues. What she didn't expect was, Toby suddenly appeared and attacked her. Chris ran all the way to the fields. In her panic, she fell to the ground. This monster Toby was incredibly fast. Toby took the woman away from behind with a knife. The woman's screams came from the woods. The priest hadn't been here for long. He accidentally found some information while cleaning. The first group of Native Americans in the town were from an indigenous tribe. In 1674, Tonino passed on information to his hometown tribe. He said he had found a suitable place to settle. When the tribe members arrived, however, they discovered that death permeated the air here. They only encountered a strange Native American elder. The elder said that Tonino had died unexpectedly not long ago. Tonino's followers insisted on burying him in the ground despite warnings. After an evil entity possessed the body, Tonino revived and brutally killed everyone again. Tonino had turned into a mindless beast. He was feasting on his followers while lying on the ground. When he saw familiar tribe members, he attempted to attack but ultimately failed. He was shot on the spot by the tribe members. The Native American elder said they had been protecting this land for generations. The forest was like a mouth of demons. Anything buried there would come back to life. The longer the time, the more the revived beings desired to kill. The only way to eliminate them was to attack their eyes. In remembrance of Tonino, the tribe members named the town after him. They also secretly sealed off the forest to prevent others from entering. Only a few major families knew about this. For example, Toby's father, the farmer. He now regrets it. Toby has become increasingly bloodthirsty. He even ate his own pet dogs. The records in the Martin family's church are very clear. His ancestors were the founders, including Tonino. Martin's father had known about this for a long time. That's why he wants his son to leave the town. Such a thing as the undead has occurred. They must stop it. Otherwise, it will affect all the residents in town. Meanwhile, Chris appeared inside the hospital. Her body was extremely dirty, as if she had just crawled out of a grave. Ella helped her onto the bed. She intended to wipe off the dirt from Chris's body with a wet towel. To her surprise, Chris's skin was paper thin. With a gentle touch of water, a large patch came off. Ella sensed something was wrong and hurriedly escaped from the hospital. The hospital had already become a slaughterhouse. Chris' ultimate goal is Ella. It's impossible to let her go. Ella sought help from the doctor. Ella saw that the doctor's head was tilted and he lay dead on the ground. She screamed in fear. The next moment, her face was splattered with blood. The nurse was killed by Chris and fell to the ground. Then ELLA fled to the ward. Chris pursued her relentlessly. Ella grabbed the cane next to her and struck Chris, but she was quickly injured by Chris's counterattack. Then Chris took the cane. She held it against Ella's neck, causing her to suffocate gradually. Ella's feet left the ground, and she died instantly. When Martin arrived, the hospital ward was already in chaos. On the floor, there were 2 words written in blood: farm. Martin can only save Ella by going there. It wasn't just him. Even the main representatives of the town gathered there. They wanted to deal with the revived Toby. The farmer felt that he couldn't let his son destroy the entire town. They split up, each armed with a hunting rifle, to search for their target. Once someone found him, they would directly attack Toby's eyes. Toby hid in the dark, waiting to counterattack. While the mayor was searching, Toby ambushed him and dragged him into the darkness. The female principal was also killed by Toby while waiting for an opportunity. The sheriff was also trampled under Toby's feet. He was burned to charcoal. Monster Chris receives good friends from the past. King was beaten by his girlfriend. He pleaded with Martin not to shoot and harm Chris. Martin was in a dilemma. If this continued, King would be killed on the spot. At a critical moment, Martin's father suddenly took action. He fired 2 shots and brought down the monster. He sternly warned King, "That person is no longer Chris. Death is her best destination." However, Martin's father failed to shoot the monster's eyes. Chris ambushed and killed Martin's father. King no longer hesitated and shot his girlfriend to death. The number of survivors was decreasing. Toby set a fire outside the door. The farmer took shelter in the cellar with 2 young people. There is a passage here that leads to an unknown destination. This was dug out by Toby after his resurrection. Martin found Ella's necklace at the entrance of the passage. They speculated that the person was hidden inside. They carefully crawled inside. There are 3 forks in the passage. 1 person, 1 intersection. They made an agreement. If Ella also turns into a monster, they will kill her. Luckily, Ella hadn't encountered any trouble. She is just a bait now. Toby lured them to the underground. The farmer encountered Toby. He couldn't bear to pull the trigger as he looked at that face. When Martin and King came over, the farmer had already been disemboweled. He didn't want to harm his son until his death. When they crawled out of the underground passage and arrived at the Little God Swamp. This is the campsite of evil forces. King was covered in injuries and couldn't move. The only thing he could do was to protect himself. Martin walked into the swamp, searching around with his gun. Toby was like a crocodile. He lurked underwater without making a sound. Toby launched an attack from behind. King saw the fight in the swamp. He also raised his pistol and took aim. Martin was pressed underwater, struggling and resisting. King couldn't afford to delay any longer. He pulled the trigger, aiming at Toby's eyes. The monster's weak spot was its eyes. The mud entangling Ella gradually thinned out. She regained her strength, opened the lid, and regained her freedom. Toby died. After the funeral, the small town returned to its former tranquility. Martin and Ella don't want to go anywhere else. They are prepared to stay here and guard for a lifetime. However, King wants to leave alone, because he no longer has any attachments here. The movie ends here. This film is the second installment of Pet Ranch. The overall plot of the film is still good. However, the horror atmosphere is not quite in place. The film does not mention the exact origin of the demons. Once a person dies, they cannot be resurrected. However, under the influence of demons, anything dead can come back to life. Another interpretation is that people or animals that come back to life are lifeless without souls. This is a prequel to the first installment of Pet Ranch. Interested viewers can watch the original film. Okay. The entire video ends here. See you next time.